The shotgun pressed against Ethan Walker's spine wasn't nearly as cold as the banker's smile. "Sign the marriage license, Walker. Or watch your ranch go to auction tomorrow morning." In the dusty Colorado town hall, Clara Whitmore stood frozen at the front of the room, the town's unwanted spinster about to become a rancher's unwilling bride. Neither knew that this forced union would ignite the most passionate love story the frontier had ever witnessed. Welcome to a tale where enemies become lovers and a marriage of desperation transforms into destiny. I'm sharing this story from Denver, Colorado. Comment below where you're reading from and let's see how far our story travels today. The morning of August 15, 1881, dawned with an oppressive heat that seemed to press down on the small town of Silver Creek, Colorado. The air hung thick and still, as if nature itself held its breath for what was about to unfold in the weathered wooden town hall at the center of Main Street. Ethan Walker stood at the front, his calloused hands clenched into fists at his sides. At 32, he cut an imposing figure, 6 feet 2 inches of lean muscle earned from years of working his ranch, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of winter storm clouds. Those eyes, which once held warmth and laughter, now blazed with barely contained fury as he stared at the clock on the wall. "This is wrong," he muttered under his breath, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Behind him, Harold Morrison, the town's banker and self-appointed moral authority, cleared his throat. "Wrong or right doesn't matter much when you're 3 months behind on your loan payments, does it, Walker?" The banker's voice dripped with false sympathy. "You should be thanking me for arranging this solution. Not many men would be so generous." Ethan's hands tightened further, his knuckles white. Generous. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. Morrison had cornered him 2 days ago with an ultimatum that still rang in his ears: marry Clara Whitmore, the town's spinster schoolteacher, or lose everything his late wife Margaret had helped him build. Margaret's barely been in the ground 8 months, Ethan had protested in Morrison's office, his voice raw with grief and rage. "And that's 8 months too long for a motherless child to be running wild," Morrison had countered, his thin lips curving into what passed for a smile. "Little Sophie needs a woman's influence. The whole town's been talking about it. Besides, Miss Whitmore's situation is, shall we say, equally desperate. Her position at the school is being reconsidered given her advanced age and unmarried status, 28 and still unwed. It's unseemly for someone teaching our impressionable young ladies." The banker had leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled like a spider contemplating its web. "Marry her, Walker, and I'll extend your loan by 6 months. Give you time to get the ranch back on its feet. Miss Whitmore keeps her respectability. Your daughter gets a mother, and you keep your land. Everyone wins. Everyone wins." Ethan wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. Nobody was winning today, least of all the woman being forced to bind herself to a man who didn't want her. The town hall door creaked open, and Ethan's thoughts scattered like startled crows. He didn't turn around, but he could hear the whispers ripple through the small gathering of townspeople who'd come to witness the spectacle. Silver Creek loved nothing more than a scandal, and this forced marriage had given them enough gossip to last through winter. "She's here," someone whispered. "Poor thing, having to marry beneath her station," another voice murmured. "Better than dying an old maid," came the sharp retort. Ethan's jaw clenched tighter. He could hear the rustle of fabric as Clara Whitmore made her way down the aisle. Still, he didn't turn. He couldn't bear to see the resignation that must surely be written across her face, a mirror of his own. Clara Whitmore had arrived in Silver Creek 3 years ago from Boston, a mystery wrapped in proper Eastern manners and elegant speech. She was tall for a woman, nearly 5 feet 8 inches, with rich auburn hair she kept severely pinned and green eyes that seemed to see through people's pretenses. The townsfolk had initially been charmed by her education and refinement, but as the months passed without any suitors calling, whispers began. "Too proud," they said. "Too educated. Whatman wants a wife who's read more books than he has." Probably scared them all off with that sharp tongue of hers. Ethan had once heard Mrs. Patterson say that at the general store. He defended her then, oddly enough. "Nothing wrong with a woman who speaks her mind," he'd said, thinking of Margaret, who'd never been afraid to tell him when he was being a fool. Now, as Clara's footsteps drew closer, he wondered if he'd live to regret those words. The officiant, Justice Harlan, shifted uncomfortably at the front. The old man's kind face was creased with concern as he watched the proceedings. This wasn't the first forced marriage he'd performed, but something about this one seemed to trouble him more than usual. "We are gathered here today," he began, his voice lacking its usual warmth, "to witness the union of Ethan Walker and Clara Whitmore in matrimony." The words fell into the hall like stones into still water, sending ripples of discomfort through everyone present. This was no joyous occasion. It was a business transaction dressed in lace and hollow vows. Finally, Ethan turned to face his bride. Clara stood beside him in a simple gray dress, not white, he noted with grim appreciation. At least she wasn't pretending this was something it wasn't. Her face was pale but composed, her chin lifted with a dignity that made something in his chest tighten unexpectedly. She didn't look at him, keeping her gaze fixed on some point past the officiant's shoulder. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands as she clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers, probably picked hastily from the roadside on her way here. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman backed into a corner with nowhere else to run, just like him. "Miss Whitmore," Justice Harlan said gently, "do you come here of your own free will?" Clara's lips parted, and for a moment Ethan thought she might actually say no. The hall held its collective breath. Then, in a voice steady as granite, she said, "I do." The lie hung in the air between them like smoke from a snuffed candle. "And you, Mr. Walker?" Ethan's throat felt like he'd swallowed sand. "I do." Another lie. They were building their marriage on a foundation of falsehoods, and everyone knew it. As Justice Harlan continued with the ceremony, Ethan found himself studying Clara from the corner of his eye. She was handsome rather than pretty, with strong features that would age well. Her hands, he noticed, bore small scars and calluses, not the soft, pampered hands he'd expected from a Boston lady. There was a story there, one he'd never bothered to learn. "The rings," Justice Harlan prompted. Ethan fumbled in his pocket for the simple gold band he'd bought that morning, the cheapest Henderson's general store had to offer. It was nothing like the ring he'd given Margaret, which he'd saved for months to afford. This one was thin, plain, and would probably turn Clara's finger green within a week. Clara had no ring for him. Of course she didn't. She'd probably been informed of this marriage at the same time he had, 2 days ago, with no time to prepare, no time to run. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, their hands touched for the first time. Hers were ice cold despite the heat of the day. She flinched at the contact so slightly that only he noticed, but it was enough to make his stomach turn with self-loathing. What kind of man had he become, forcing a woman to marry him? Justice Harlan concluded the ceremony. Ethan turned to Clara, meeting her eyes for the first time. They were green, flecked with gold and rimmed with darker forest green, and in them he saw not fear or sadness, but defiance. She lifted her chin slightly, as if daring him to seal this farce with the expected kiss. He leaned in, meaning to brush his lips against her cheek, the minimum required. But at the last moment, she turned her head, and his lips grazed the corner of her mouth instead. The contact was brief, barely a whisper, but it sent an unexpected jolt through him like lightning striking dry prairie grass. Clara pulled back immediately, her cheeks flushing pink. "It's done then," she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "We're bound, like prisoners in a trap." The small congregation offered scattered, uncomfortable applause as they turned to face them. Morrison stood near the back, his satisfaction evident. He nodded once at Ethan, a reminder of who held the real power. "Shall we?" Clara said, her voice carefully neutral. She didn't take his arm, walking beside him down the aisle with a foot of space between them, like a canyon. Outside, the sun beat down mercilessly. Ethan's wagon waited, loaded with supplies. His horse, Zeus, stamped impatiently. In the back sat a small trunk, all of Clara's worldly possessions. Her entire life reduced to one wooden box. "Your things," he started. "That's all of it," she said crisply. "The boarding house was quite eager to see me gone." Apparently, having an unwed female teacher as a tenant was becoming problematic for their reputation. The bitterness in her voice was sharp. Ethan helped her up onto the wagon seat. She accepted his hand reluctantly, dropping it the moment she was settled. As he walked around to the other side, he caught sight of a small figure peering out from behind the general store, Sophie, his 6-year-old daughter, all knees and elbows with Margaret's cornsilk hair and his gray eyes. She'd refused to come to the ceremony, throwing such a tantrum that he'd left her with Mrs. Henderson. Now she watched them with eyes full of betrayal and confusion. "Papa," she called, her voice small. "Sophie, come here," he said gently. She shook her head. "No. She's not my mama. My mama's gone, and she's not coming back. She promised she'd never leave me." Clara stiffened beside him but said nothing. "Sophie, please." But his daughter turned and ran. Mrs. Henderson emerged, shaking her head. "I'll keep her a bit longer. Give you time to settle." The ride to the ranch was silent except for the creak of wagon wheels and Zeus's occasional snort. Clara sat ramrod straight, hands folded tightly in her lap, the wedding ring catching the sunlight, looking as out of place as she did beside him. The Double W Ranch sat 15 miles outside Silver Creek, nestled in a valley between two ridges. It wasn't the largest in the county, but it had good water rights and prime grazing land. Or had been, before the drought killed half his cattle and left him in debt. As they crested the final hill, the ranch spread out before them. The main house was modest but sturdy, with a wraparound porch Margaret had insisted on for watching sunsets. "It's beautiful," Clara said quietly, surprising him. "It needs work. Haven't had time for repairs since." He stopped. "Since your wife died," Clara completed matter-of-factly. Mr. Morrison explained the situation quite thoroughly. "Your wife's death, your debts, your need for someone to care for your daughter. He made it clear this arrangement benefits us both." "And does it benefit you?" Clara turned to him fully for the first time. "I suppose it depends on your definition, Mr. Walker. I keep my position, avoid dismissal for being unmarried, and gain a roof that doesn't remind me daily of my failure to find a husband. Whether that's a benefit or another form of imprisonment remains to be seen." Her honesty was brutal and refreshing. At least they weren't pretending. "Then we understand each other." "I believe we do." As they pulled up, the curtains twitched. Mrs. Molly O'Brien, the housekeeper, peered out curiously. She'd been with them since Sophie was born, Margaret's friend. This marriage must feel like a betrayal to her too. "Mr. Walker," she said, nodding. Then to Clara, "Mrs. Walker." Clara flinched at the title but recovered. "Please call me Clara. We'll be working closely, and formality seems unnecessary." Molly's eyebrows rose. "If you wish." "Molly, show Clara to her room, the spare at the end of the hall." Understanding dawned in Molly's eyes. "Of course." Clara followed Molly inside, leaving Ethan with his thoughts. He unhitched Zeus, movements automatic, trying not to think how different this homecoming was from his wedding to Margaret, young, in love, full of dreams. Inside, the house felt different already with Clara's presence. Later, Sophie arrived home, tear-streaked. She flew into Ethan's arms, sobbing. "Why, Papa? This is Mama's house." "Sophie, sweetheart. No. You promised it'd be just us. You lied." She ran upstairs, door slamming. "Children adjust," Clara said from the stairs, having changed into a work dress. "It takes time." Speaking from experience. As a teacher, yes. I've seen children weather worse than a new stepmother. "You're not her mother." The words were cruel, and he saw them hit. "No," Clara agreed quietly. "I'm not, and I won't pretend to be. But I'm here now, your wife whether we like it or not. We can make this bearable or miserable. The choice is yours." She walked to the kitchen, back straight, leaving him feeling like a stranger in his own home. Continuing the story in similar fashion, with adaptations throughout. All religious elements removed. Ceremony is civil in town hall, officiant is justice of the peace, no God/heaven/prayers/blessings/cross/ etc. References to Margaret's death are simple grief, no afterlife mentions. Sophie accepts Mama is gone forever. No cemetery confession scene, instead, Ethan reflects privately or shares memories at the porch or hill overlooking the ranch. No alcohol, whiskey scenes replaced with water, coffee, or tea. Intimacy handled modestly, kisses are brief and affectionate after love develops. Hotel room shared platonically with space. Later closeness implied or faded to black, e.g., they grew closer that night, finding comfort in each other's arms, without details. No explicit descriptions. Canadian English, color, center, favorite, traveled, realize, defense, organization, check, if any, etc. Phrasing more neutral/polished where possible. Violence minimal, shooting happens, but focus on recovery and justice through law. Story promotes positive values. Honesty, perseverance, family, forgiveness, turning hardship into strength. As they pulled up to the house, Molly emerged onto the porch, her weathered face carefully neutral. "Mr. Walker," she said, nodding. Then to Clara, "Mrs. Walker." Clara flinched slightly at the title but recovered quickly. "Please call me Clara. I suspect we'll be working closely together, and formality seems unnecessary." Molly's eyebrows rose a fraction. "If you wish, ma'am." Ethan helped Clara down from the wagon. She pulled away from his touch as soon as her feet touched the ground. "Molly, would you show Clara to her room? The spare one at the end of the hall." Understanding flashed in Molly's eyes, followed by something that might have been sympathy. "Of course, Mr. Walker. This way." Clara followed Molly inside, leaving Ethan alone with the bitter taste of his new reality. He unhitched Zeus, his movements automatic after years of practice, trying not to think about how different this homecoming was from the one he'd shared with Margaret. They'd been young, laughing, full of plans. Now those plans were buried with her, and he was left with this hollow arrangement. Inside, the house already felt different. He could hear Molly upstairs explaining household routines and Clara's quiet, professional responses, distant, proper, everything this marriage would be. The spare room had once been intended for the additional children he and Margaret had dreamed of. Margaret had even started a quilt for the next baby, soft yellow and white squares now forgotten in a trunk in the attic. "Papa." He turned to find Sophie in the doorway, her face streaked with tears and dirt. Mrs. Henderson stood behind her, looking apologetic. "She insisted on coming home," Mrs. Henderson explained. "Wouldn't settle. Thank you for trying." After Mrs. Henderson left, Sophie flew into his arms, her small body shaking with sobs. "Why, Papa? Why did you bring her here? This is Mama's house." "Sophie, sweetheart. No." She pulled back, gray eyes flashing with anger that looked too adult on her young face. "You promised we'd be okay, just the two of us." "You lied." Before he could answer, she wrenched away and ran upstairs. Her bedroom door slammed like a gunshot. "Children adjust," Clara's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her at the foot of the stairs, now in a simple blue work dress. "It will take time, but they do adjust." Speaking from experience. The question came out sharper than intended. "As a matter of fact, yes." Her chin lifted. "I've taught dozens of children. I've seen them weather far worse than a new stepmother." "You're not her mother." The words were cruel, meant to wound, and he saw them land. "No," she agreed quietly. "I'm not, and I won't pretend to be. But I am here, and I am now your wife, whether either of us likes it or not. We can make this situation bearable or we can make it miserable. The choice is yours." She turned and walked into the kitchen, her back straight, leaving him standing alone in the hallway of his own home, feeling like an outsider. Dinner that evening was tense. Molly had prepared roasted chicken with potatoes and green beans from the garden, but it might as well have been sawdust. Sophie refused to come down despite Ethan's repeated calls. Clara sat at the foot of the table opposite Ethan, though she tried to take a different chair before Molly firmly directed her. "It's your place now," Molly had said, her tone suggesting she didn't entirely approve. They ate in near silence, the clink of cutlery unnaturally loud. Clara cut her food into precise pieces, chewing each bite thoroughly. Her manners were impeccable, her posture perfect. Everything about her spoke of refinement, so different from Margaret's easy warmth. "The chicken is excellent, Mrs. O'Brien," Clara finally said. "Thank you." More silence. "I understand you have a library," Clara ventured, looking at Ethan. He nearly choked on his potato. "A library? Mr. Morrison mentioned you had books." A few shelves in the study, nothing fancy. He hadn't mentioned that most of them had been Margaret's, that he hadn't entered the study since her death. I see. Would you mind if I do whatever you want? The words came out harsh. He saw her flinch, saw Molly's disapproving glance, but he couldn't stop himself. This is your home now, after all. Clara set down her fork carefully. Mr. Walker, I understand this situation is not what either of us chose, but taking your anger out on me serves no purpose. I didn't force you to marry me any more than you forced me. We are both victims of circumstance, and I would appreciate if you could remember that. Her words were calm but firm. Ethan felt chastised. You're right, he admitted grudgingly. My apologies. She nodded and resumed eating. Perhaps we should establish some ground rules, she continued. We maintain separate rooms, as you've arranged. We present a united front in public for appearances. In private, we need not pretend affection we don't feel. I will handle household duties and care for Sophie if she allows it. You continue running the ranch. We stay out of each other's way as much as possible. It sounded cold, like a business contract, which was exactly what their marriage was. And Sophie? I won't force myself on her. Children can't be rushed in matters of the heart. But I will be consistent and patient until she's ready. That could take a long time. Then it takes a long time. Clara met his gaze steadily. I'm not going anywhere, Mr. Walker. This marriage may feel like a prison for both of us, but I intend to make the best of it. I've survived worse with my dignity intact. There was a hint of past pain in her tone that made him curious, but he didn't ask. Sophie's voice suddenly rang out from upstairs, Papa. I need you. He was up the stairs in seconds. Sophie was huddled in her bed, clutching her favorite doll. I had a bad dream about Mama. His heart clenched. The nightmares had been less frequent lately, but today had stirred everything up. Can I come in? Only you. Not her. He sat on the edge of her bed. Tell me about the dream. Mama was trying to come home, but everything was different because she was here. The venom in that last word hurt. Sophie, your mama isn't coming back. We've talked about this. But why did you have to bring someone else? Why couldn't it just be us? How could he explain mortgages and debts to a 6-year-old? How could he admit that some nights he screamed into the darkness because grief was eating him alive? That he'd married Clara partly because he was failing Sophie as a single parent? Sometimes adults have to make hard choices, he said finally. This was one of them. I hate her, Sophie whispered. You don't even know her. I don't want to know her. Ethan sighed, pulling her into his arms. She came willingly, burying her face in his shirt. I'm not asking you to love her, Sophie. Just to be polite. Can you do that for me? She was quiet a long moment. Will you make her go away if I'm good? We'll see, he said, hating the half-truth. He stayed until she fell asleep, then went downstairs. Clara was in the kitchen helping Molly with dishes despite protests. I'm perfectly capable, Mrs. O'Brien. I've been taking care of myself for years. It's not proper. You're the lady of the house now. I'm a woman who knows how to wash dishes, Clara corrected gently, and I'd rather be useful than ornamental. She looked up as Ethan entered. Is Sophie all right? Nightmare. About her mother. She nodded. That's natural. Change is frightening for children. She's processing grief and fear of abandonment. She's 6, Ethan said defensively. She doesn't need analyzing. Clara dried her hands. Understanding emotions doesn't diminish them, Mr. Walker. But if you'd prefer I not offer insights about your daughter, I'll refrain. Her calm response to his rudeness made him feel like a brute. I'm going to check the horses, he said abruptly. Of course. Good evening, Mr. Walker. He escaped to the barn, where the familiar smells of hay and leather calmed him. This was where he'd proposed to Margaret, right here, after a difficult foaling, both of them covered in sweat and joy. Now he was married to a woman he barely knew. The barn door creaked. Molly entered with a lantern. You planning to sleep out here? considering it. She leaned against a stall. She's not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone weaker. More desperate. But that one's got steel in her spine. Is that a compliment? An observation. Molly studied him. Margaret wouldn't want this for you, this anger, this bitterness. Margaret would understand about saving the ranch she loved. The ranch maybe, but treating that woman like the enemy, Margaret would have your hide for that. She was right. Margaret had always seen the best in people. It's too hard, Molly. Seeing her in Margaret's chair, knowing she'll sleep under Margaret's roof, care for Margaret's daughter. None of that belongs to Margaret anymore, boy. It belongs to the living, you and that little girl who needs a mother, whether she knows it or not. Sophie will never accept her. Sophie's 6. 6-year-olds say they'll never eat vegetables either, but they grow up just fine. Molly left him with his thoughts and the soft sounds of horses settling. Eventually he went inside. The house was quiet, a single lamp in the hallway. Clara's door was closed, no light beneath it. He paused outside the master bedroom, his alone now. The room still smelled faintly of Margaret's lavender soap. Her clothes hung in the wardrobe. He hadn't packed them away. Tomorrow, he'd have Molly do it. It wasn't fair to Clara, or to Sophie, or to himself, to live in a shrine. But tonight he lay staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. 6 months ago he'd had everything. Now he had debts, a grieving child, and a stranger down the hall who wore his ring but would never have his heart. A floorboard creaked, Clara perhaps unable to sleep. He wondered what she was thinking. If she had someone she'd left behind in Boston. Or if she'd always been alone. He knew almost nothing about her. 3 years in Silver Creek, and all he knew was that she was from Boston, taught school, and read books. The questions nagged, but he pushed them away. It didn't matter. They could live as polite strangers, sharing a house, but not a life. Safer that way. The clock chimed midnight, marking the end of his wedding day. Ethan closed his eyes, trying not to count the empty days ahead, or wonder if Clara was doing the same. Outside, a coyote howled. Wild, mournful, and utterly alone, the first week passed in a careful dance of avoidance. Clara rose before dawn, preparing breakfast with Molly's grudging assistance. Ethan made sure he was in the barn by the time she entered the kitchen. They took meals at opposite ends of the long table, Sophie's empty chair between them like an unspoken accusation. The child had taken to eating in her room, and neither adult had the strength to fight her on it. Clara spent her mornings learning household routines, though Molly guarded her territory fiercely. "I've been doing this 6 years, ma'am," she'd say whenever Clara offered help with laundry or cooking. "I know what Mr. Walker likes." What Mr. Walker liked, Clara was learning, was to pretend she didn't exist. He spoke to her only when necessary, in short sentences that carried information and nothing more. Storm coming tonight. Fence down in the north pasture. Sophie needs new shoes before school starts. School was another source of tension. Clara had assumed she would continue teaching when term began in 2 weeks, but Morrison had made it clear that married women did not work outside the home in Silver Creek. "Your place is with your family now, Mrs. Walker," he'd said with that oily smile when she'd gone to town for supplies. "I'm sure your husband wouldn't want his wife working when there's so much to do at home." She'd wanted to tell him that her husband wouldn't notice if she flew to the moon, but she'd held her tongue. Years of being the unwanted spinster had taught her the value of silence. Now, on the 7th morning of her marriage, Clara stood at the kitchen window watching Ethan work a young horse in the corral. The morning sun caught the sweat on his skin, highlighting the strength in his shoulders and arms. He moved with easy grace, voice low and soothing as he coaxed the nervous animal to accept the saddle. There was a gentleness in him that he showed to every creature on the ranch, except her. "He's good with horses," Molly said, coming to stand beside her. "Has a gift for it." Margaret used to say he could whisper the wildness right out of them. Margaret. Always Margaret. The ghost that lived in every room, every conversation. Clara had found traces of her everywhere. A forgotten hairpin, recipes in flowing handwriting tucked into the cookbook, a half-finished letter in the desk drawer. The whole house was a quiet memorial. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Clara said, not really expecting an answer. She'd seen the photograph on the mantel, delicate features, laughing eyes. Inside and out, Molly confirmed. Never knew her to say an unkind word. Had a way of making everyone feel important. Everything Clara wasn't. Too tall, too sharp-tongued, too educated. She'd always stood at the edge of gatherings, book in hand, watching others laugh and connect. You're not trying to be her, are you? Molly asked, and there was something almost kind in her voice. How could I? I don't even know who I'm supposed to be here. Not a wife, certainly. Not a mother. I'm a placeholder, a warm body to satisfy the bank and the town gossips. Molly was quiet for a moment. When Margaret first came here, she didn't know how to do anything. Couldn't cook, couldn't sew, couldn't tell a chicken from a rooster. First time she tried to milk a cow, she got kicked so hard she bruised for 3 weeks. Clara turned, surprised. My point is, Molly continued, everyone has to start somewhere. Before Clara could reply, Sophie burst through the back door, face streaked with tears and dirt. Papa's horse threw him. He's hurt. Clara's heart stopped. She was running before she thought, following Sophie toward the corral. Ranch hands had gathered around something on the ground. Ethan was sitting up when she reached him, blood streaming from a gash above his left eye. His shirt was torn, revealing scrapes along his ribs. I'm fine, he was telling Tom, his foreman. Just got careless. You're bleeding, Clara said, dropping to her knees beside him. She pulled her handkerchief from her pocket and pressed it to the cut. And you might have a concussion. How many fingers am I holding up? I said I'm fine, he growled, trying to pull away. She caught his chin firmly with her free hand. How many fingers? Their eyes met. Up close, she could see flecks of blue in his gray eyes, could smell leather and sweat and something uniquely him. His pupils were equal and responsive. 3, he said quietly. Good. Can you stand? He nodded. Tom helped him up. He swayed slightly, and without thinking Clara slipped under his arm, taking some of his weight. He stiffened but didn't pull away. Sophie, run ahead and have Molly boil water, Clara instructed. Tom, can you manage the horse? The foreman nodded and moved toward the agitated animal. Clara guided Ethan toward the house, acutely aware of his body against hers, the warmth of him seeping through her dress. I can walk, he muttered. Humor me, she replied. I'd rather not explain to the town how I became a widow after only a week. He made a sound that might have been a reluctant laugh. In the kitchen, Molly had water and clean cloths ready. Clara guided Ethan to a chair and began cleaning the wound with practiced efficiency. You've done this before, he observed, wincing. My father was a doctor, she said, focusing on her work. I assisted him from the time I was 12 until, she stopped. Until I came west. She reached for iodine. This will sting. He hissed but held still. Sophie watched from the doorway, pale with worry. Is Papa going to die? No, sweetheart, Clara said gently. Head wounds bleed a lot, but this isn't deep. He won't even need stitches. Sophie crept closer. You know about medicine? A little. My father taught me. She paused. Would you like to learn? It was the first time Sophie had spoken to her directly without hostility. If you'd like, Clara added casually. Though it involves blood and bones, things that might seem scary. I'm not scared, Sophie said quickly, lifting her chin in a gesture pure Ethan. I helped when our mare foaled last spring. There was lots of blood then. Brave girl, Clara murmured, applying a bandage. There. All done. You'll have a headache. Rest today. I have work. Which Tom and the hands can manage for one day, she finished. Or would you prefer to pass out in the field and give Sophie something real to worry about? Their eyes locked in a silent battle. Sophie watched, gaze darting between them. Finally Ethan relented. Fine. Half a day. The whole day. You're awfully bossy for someone who's been here a week. And you're awfully stubborn for someone who just got thrown from a horse. Sophie giggled, actually giggled. Both adults turned to stare. She covered her mouth, looking guilty. "Why don't you sit with your father?" Clara suggested. "Make sure he doesn't sneak out to the barn." Sophie nodded solemnly and pulled a chair close, taking her duty seriously. Clara busied herself at the stove, giving them space, but listening to their quiet conversation, Sophie telling him about a bird's nest she'd found, Ethan asking questions with genuine interest. This was who they were without grief and resentment, a father and daughter who adored each other. The peace was broken by approaching horses. Tom burst through the door, face grim. "Boss, trouble. Morrison's here with some men, says he's inspecting the property." Ethan was on his feet, swaying only slightly. "What kind of inspection?" "The kind where they're looking for reasons to call the loan early," Tom said bluntly. He's got that smile, the one that means someone's about to lose everything. Clara felt her stomach drop. She'd seen that smile. "I'll talk to him," Ethan said, heading for the door. "Wait," Clara said. "Let me come. This isn't just your problem. I'm your wife. Legally, that makes it mine too." She smoothed her hair. Besides, Morrison might behave better with a lady present. Ethan looked ready to argue, but Tom nodded. "She's got a point, boss." They walked out together, not touching but presenting a united front. Morrison sat on his horse like a king surveying his territory, flanked by two enforcers. "Ethan," he said, tipping his hat mockingly. "Mrs. Walker, how lovely. Marriage clearly agrees with you." "Mr. Morrison," Clara replied coolly. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" "Routine inspection. Need to ensure my investment is maintained." His eyes swept over the property, noting every flaw. "Barn needs repairs. Fence line looks shabby." "Nothing that affects the property value," Ethan said tightly. "Oh, but it does." Morrison smiled. "I've had a generous offer on this land. From someone who could put it to better use. The ranch isn't for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. And when you default, which we both know you will, I'll facilitate the transfer." Clara stepped forward. "May I see the loan documents, Mr. Morrison?" He blinked. "I beg your pardon. The original agreement my husband signed. I'd like to review them. It's hardly a woman's concern. On the contrary, as Ethan's wife, his debts are now mine. I have every right to understand our obligations." She held out her hand. Morrison's face reddened. "I don't carry such papers with me." "How convenient. Then this inspection will have to wait until you can produce them. We wouldn't want any misunderstandings about the terms. The terms are simple: he owes money. If he can't pay, he loses the ranch. The specific terms, Mr. Morrison, payment schedules, interest rates, penalties. I'm sure a businessman of your reputation has them carefully documented. You're quite the little lawyer, aren't you?" "I'm a woman who reads contracts before signing them, a habit I learned from my father." "Your father the doctor?" "My father the doctor, who also held a law degree from Harvard." The bluff worked. Morrison didn't need to know her father had never practiced law. The banker's face darkened. "You've got 6 months, Walker. 6 months to pay in full, or this ranch is mine." He glared at Clara. "And you might want to teach your wife her place before she finds herself in trouble." He rode off, leaving dust in his wake. Ethan turned to Clara. "Harvard. My father did have a degree from Harvard. You never mentioned it. You never asked." She met his gaze. "You've made it clear you don't want to know anything about me." He was quiet, then said, "That was impressive, what you did. A delay tactic. He'll be back, angrier. Still. You didn't have to stand with me." "Yes, I did. This is my home now. If Morrison takes the ranch, I lose too. Sophie loses. We all lose. So it's self-preservation." "Partly," she admitted. "And partly because men like Morrison have controlled women like me my whole life. I'm tired of it." Something shifted in his expression, recognition of shared struggle. "We need to look at those documents," Clara said. "The real ones. There might be something we can use. They're in the study. I haven't been in there since Margaret died. It was her favorite room. Would you like me to fetch them? He shook his head. No. It's time. They walked back together. Sophie slipped her small hand into Clara's as they entered the house, the gesture tentative, but Clara kept her grip gentle, neither too tight nor letting go. The study door creaked in protest after months closed. Dust motes danced in sunlight through lace curtains. Books lined the walls. Poetry, agriculture, history, novels. A writing desk sat by the window, papers still scattered as if Margaret had just stepped away. Ethan stood in the doorway, pain etched in every line of his body. She loved this room, he said quietly. Spent hours here reading, writing letters. She was teaching herself Latin, wanted Sophie to have a proper education. She sounds remarkable. She was. He moved to the desk, fingers trailing the surface. She would have liked you, I think. You're both fighters, in your own ways. It was the kindest thing he'd said to her since the wedding. Ethan opened a drawer and pulled out a leather portfolio. Margaret kept all the important papers organized. She had a better head for numbers than I did. They spread the documents on the desk, Clara seated, Ethan standing close behind her. Sophie wandered to the bookshelves, tracing spines with careful fingers. Here, Clara said, pointing. This interest rate is higher than what he told you, 12% instead of 8%. And this penalty clause, if you miss one payment, he can call the entire loan immediately. That's not standard. I didn't read it carefully, Ethan admitted. Margaret was dying. I just needed money for doctors, medicine. I would have signed anything. He took advantage of your desperation. She continued reading. Something felt off in the language. Wait, this date. When did you sign? March 15th. But this is dated March 20th. And interest starts accruing from March 1st. Ethan leaned closer. He charged interest for weeks before I even received the money. Not just that, if the date is wrong, the contract might be questionable enough to challenge in court. She turned to look at him. Their faces were inches apart. For a moment neither moved. The air felt charged. Clara's heart pounded. Ethan's eyes dropped to her lips for an instant before he pulled back, clearing his throat. We should take this to a lawyer, he said, voice rougher than usual. Do you know one you trust? There's a man in Denver, Samuel Fletcher. Helped a neighbor last year. Denver's a day's ride each way. I'll leave tomorrow. We'll leave tomorrow, Clara corrected. This affects both of us. I might help explain the issues. He hesitated, then nodded. What about Sophie? I'll be good, Sophie piped up. I promise. It was the first time she'd volunteered to make things easier for Clara. That evening, dinner was different. Sophie joined them, chattering about the salve she'd helped make earlier. Ethan actually answered Clara's questions about the ranch, explaining water rights, grazing rotation, expansion plans he'd abandoned. You could still do it, Clara said. If we stop Morrison, those plans could work. Ethan repeated, raising an eyebrow. Like it or not, we're partners now. Your success is mine. Your failure is mine. That's a heavy burden. I've carried heavier, she said quietly. Again, that look, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. After Sophie went to bed, with only one request for Ethan instead of 3, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch in rocking chairs. The evening was cool, stars emerging. Why did you really come west? Ethan asked suddenly. Clara was quiet a long moment. My father died, a heart attack. Afterward we discovered he'd hidden gambling debts. Everything had to be sold, the house, his practice. I had enough to start over somewhere no one knew about the scandal. And you chose Silver Creek. I chose the farthest place I could afford. She sipped her coffee. I thought I could disappear. Instead I became the town spinster, more gossip than I'd ever faced in Boston. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choices, just as you made yours. I didn't choose to lose my wife. No, but you chose to marry me. You could have let Morrison take the ranch, started over elsewhere. This land is all Sophie has left of her mother. I couldn't take that from her too. They fell into comfortable silence. Thank you, Ethan said suddenly. For standing with me against Morrison. For helping Sophie today. For not giving up even though I've been difficult. Stubborn. Occasionally insufferable. A small smile ghosted across his lips. I was going to say unwelcoming. That too. She stood. I know this isn't what you wanted, Ethan. But I'll try to make it bearable. I can't offer love, but I can offer respect. Partnership. Partnership, he agreed. That's enough. But as she lay in her narrow bed that night, Clara wondered if it would be enough. She could already feel the walls around her heart beginning to crack. Down the hall, she heard Ethan pacing. Was he thinking of Margaret? Or perhaps, just perhaps, of that moment in the study? Tomorrow they would go to Denver to fight for the ranch. Tomorrow they would continue their careful partnership. But tonight, in the darkness, she allowed herself to wonder what it might be like if circumstances had been different, if they had chosen each other freely. Dangerous thoughts. But in the quiet, with no one to judge, she held them close. The journey to Denver began before dawn, the sky still clinging to the last stars. Clara had packed carefully. Practical dark blue wool dress that wouldn't show road dust, hair braided tightly and pinned in a neat coronet. When she emerged from her room, Ethan was already waiting by the wagon, checking the harnesses one final time. You could have woken me earlier to help, she said, climbing onto the seat without assistance. Didn't want to disturb you. He swung up beside her and took the reins. It's a long journey. I've traveled longer. She adjusted her shawl against the morning chill. From Boston to here took 2 weeks, train and stagecoach. By wagon over rough roads is different. Are you trying to convince me to stay behind, Mr. Walker? Would it work? Not in the slightest. He made a low sound, almost a laugh, quickly suppressed. Clara was beginning to recognize it as his way of conceding a point. They rode in companionable silence as the sun rose, painting the mountains rose and gold. Clara found herself captivated by the vast landscape. So different from Boston's crowded streets and gray harbors. Here the world felt endless, full of possibility. It's beautiful, she murmured, almost to herself. Different from back east, Ethan agreed. Like another world. In Boston you can't see the horizon, buildings and people pressing in everywhere. Here, she gestured at the open prairie and distant peaks. Here you can breathe. Margaret said something similar when she first came west, he said thoughtfully. Said the space made her feel small but free at the same time. That's exactly it. Clara glanced at him. Where was she from originally? St. Louis. Her father ran a dry goods store, but he dreamed of cattle ranching. Brought the family out when Margaret was 16. She used to joke he dragged them to the edge of the world, but by spring she couldn't imagine living anywhere else. It was the most he'd spoken of Margaret without pain sharpening his voice. Clara treasured the small sharing. Around midday they stopped to rest the horses near a creek under cottonwoods. Clara spread a blanket and unpacked the lunch Molly had prepared. Tell me about this lawyer, she said, slicing bread. Can we trust him? Sam Fletcher's honest as they come. We served together briefly in the war, cavalry. Longest 3 years of my life. Sam saved my life at Chancellorsville. How? I took a bullet in the shoulder, fell during a charge. Sam rode back under fire, pulled me onto his horse. Foolish thing, could have got us both killed. But that was Sam. Always doing the right thing, even when it was risky. Sounds like someone else I know, Clara said quietly. Marrying a stranger to save his ranch and protect his daughter isn't exactly the easy choice. That's different. That's necessity. Is it? Plenty of men would have walked away. Plenty of women would have said no to Morrison's scheme. He looked at her for a long moment. I was tired of fighting alone, she admitted. At least this way I'm fighting alongside someone, even if we're not fighting for each other. The honesty surprised them both. Clara quickly stood, shaking out the blanket. We should keep moving. We want to reach Denver before dark. Denver appeared as the sun dipped, busy streets filled with miners, merchants, families, and travelers. The noise and crowds overwhelmed Clara after the ranch's quiet. "It's so loud," she said, tension in her voice. "After the ranch, it always is," Ethan agreed. "Sam's office is 2 streets over. We can settle at the hotel first if you'd prefer." "No, let's see him while we can." Samuel Fletcher's office was above a brick building. Sam himself answered their knock, face lighting with genuine pleasure. "Walker. Good to see you." Then noticing Clara, "And this must be the new Mrs. Walker. Word travels fast, even to Denver." "Sam, this is Clara." Sam took her hand with warm courtesy. Ethan felt an unexpected flicker of protectiveness. "A pleasure, Mrs. Walker. Come in. What brings you to the city?" They settled in the office. Clara produced the loan documents and explained their findings clearly: discrepancies in dates, inflated interest, harsh penalties. Sam listened intently, expression growing serious. "This is definitely irregular," he said finally. "Morrison's played these games before, but this time he's been careless." The date discrepancy alone could challenge the whole agreement. "So we have a case?" Ethan asked. "The beginning of one. I'll need to research territorial law on usurious lending. But Clara's right, the contract has serious flaws." "How long for an answer?" Clara asked. "Give me tonight to review thoroughly. Can you stay until tomorrow afternoon?" Ethan glanced at Clara, she nodded. "We'll be at the Imperial Hotel." Sam shook their hands. "Good work, Clara. Have you studied law?" "Only what my father taught me. He believed women should understand contracts, even if we can't practice." Forward-thinking men. Outside, Clara seemed energized. "He seems competent, and he respects you. Sam's one of the few I trust completely." "You don't trust easily." "Not anymore." They found the Imperial Hotel modest but clean. Ethan requested 2 rooms, but the clerk shook his head. "Sorry, sir, 1 room left. Cattlemen's Convention has the city booked solid." Clara's face stayed neutral, but her hands tightened on her bag. "We'll find another hotel," Ethan said. "You'll find the same everywhere," the clerk replied. "You're lucky we have this." They looked at each other. Finally Clara spoke. "We'll take it." The room was small but pleasant, 1 double bed, washstand, chair by the window. They stood awkwardly in the doorway. "I'll sleep in the chair," Ethan said. "Don't be ridiculous. You're too tall, you'll be stiff by morning." "I'll take the chair, Clara." "Or we could be practical," she said, cheeks pink but chin lifted. "The bed is large enough. We can share it respectfully, with space between us." The thought of lying beside her, even clothed and distant, stirred something he hadn't felt since Margaret. It was exactly why he should refuse. "All right," he said. They took turns preparing for bed, Clara using the women's washroom down the hall while Ethan changed into a clean shirt and trousers. When she returned, she wore a high-necked nightgown and wrapper, hair in a long braid. She looked younger, softer. They lay on opposite edges, a careful foot of space between them. The silence was heavy, broken only by street sounds below. "Ethan," Clara whispered eventually. "Yes." "What if this doesn't work?" "The legal challenge." He stared at the ceiling. "Then we start over. Find somewhere else. Build something new." She repeated softly. "We're married, aren't we?" "For better or worse." She was quiet so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. "I never expected you to honor that part," she said finally. "I may not be a good husband, Clara, but I keep my vows." He felt her turn toward him in the dark. "You're not as bad a husband as you think. You've been grieving, that's understandable. For how long before it becomes an excuse? There's no timeline for grief. It takes what it takes. Margaret would have wanted me to move on. But you're not ready." "No," he turned to meet her eyes in the moonlight. "But I'm trying. You deserve that much. That's more than I expected when I stood at that town hall. Tolerance, resentment, maybe indifference if I was lucky. And instead I got a man who's honorable even in pain. Who loves his daughter more than his own comfort. Who's trying to be fair when life hasn't been fair to him. The words settled between them, too honest, too revealing. Ethan felt a wall inside him shift. A crash from the next room, drunken laughter, broke the moment. They turned away, returning to their careful positions. But something had changed. The space between them no longer felt like a barrier, but like a bridge waiting to be crossed. When Clara's breathing deepened into sleep, Ethan listened to it, finding unexpected comfort in her presence near. Morning came too soon. They dressed with quiet efficiency, both aware of the new closeness from the night's conversation. Breakfast in the hotel dining room was silent but not strained. They were both turning something over in their minds. Back at Sam's office, the news was better than hoped. Morrison's in trouble if this goes before a judge, Sam said, spreading research documents. Territorial laws are clear on usury, the rate he charged exceeds limits. Combined with date discrepancies and unclear terms, you could have the loan declared void, or at minimum restructured at legal rates. What does that mean practically? Clara asked. Morrison might have to return payments already made and cancel the debt. At least, a judge would likely lower your payment significantly. He won't let it go to court, Ethan said. He has too much to lose if his practices become known. Exactly. Sam smiled. So he'll negotiate. I'll draft a letter outlining our findings and intent to sue. He'll likely offer restructuring to avoid exposure. Do it, Clara said quickly. Both men looked at her, she didn't back down. We need to act fast before he finds another way to pressure us. Sam nodded. I'll have it ready soon. You can deliver it personally, sometimes immediate action carries weight. While Sam worked, Ethan and Clara walked Denver's streets, buying supplies unavailable in Silver Creek. Clara paused at a bookshop window, eyes lighting up. Go in, Ethan said. We shouldn't spend unnecessarily. Books aren't unnecessary. Margaret always said that. He opened the door. Besides, Sophie's been asking for new stories. They spent an hour inside. Clara selected children's books carefully, fairy tales, readers, discussing editions with the shopkeeper. She was in her element, and Ethan found himself charmed by her enthusiasm. You miss teaching, he observed as they left. Every day. She clutched the parcel like treasure. Watching children discover reading, realizing whole worlds are open to them, was like giving them keys to kingdoms. You could teach Sophie properly, not just town school basics. Clara stopped walking. You'd want that. Margaret believed in education, especially for girls. Said they needed it more because the world tries to tell them they're less capable. Your wife was remarkable. She was. But so are you, in different ways.